50 million years ago, a remarkably warm planet spun through the silent vacuum of space. Global temperatures hovered significantly higher than they do today, fostering lush, dense rainforests that stretched seamlessly toward the polar circles. Ice caps were absent from the globe. Vast coastal plains dominated the continental edges, bordered by the warm, shallow waters of the ancient Tethys Sea. Sunlight filtered through thick canopies of subtropical flora, casting dappled shadows onto soft, muddy banks. Here, where the terrestrial world met the marine environment, existed one of the most distinct biological boundaries on Earth. The shoreline was not merely a geographic feature. Rather, it served as a strict dividing line governed by opposing physical laws. To cross this threshold required far more than physical movement. Transitioning from a gaseous atmosphere into a dense, liquid medium demanded a physiological reinvention. On land, gravity dictates skeletal architecture. Limbs must act as sturdy pillars, supporting an internal framework against the relentless downward pull of the planet. Air allows light to travel in straight lines, providing crisp visual clarity over immense distances. Sound waves propagate relatively slowly, enabling land-dwelling creatures to pinpoint the exact origin of a rustling leaf or a snapping twig. Water rewrites every single one of these rules. Fluid mechanics replace aerodynamics. Buoyancy negates the crushing force of gravity, while simultaneously demanding a new method of propulsion. Thermal conductivity in an aquatic environment strips heat away from a warm-blooded body significantly faster than air does. Light scatters and diminishes within just a few meters, forcing any aspiring marine inhabitant to rely on different sensory inputs. To step beyond the breaking waves was to willingly enter an alien universe. For hundreds of millions of years, the grand narrative of vertebrate evolution had seemingly marched in a single direction. Ancient lobe-finned fish had hauled themselves out of the primordial waters, trading gills for lungs and fins for primitive digits. The conquest of dry land represented a major triumph over severe environmental challenges. Amphibians, reptiles, and eventually mammals diversified into countless forms, claiming ecological niches across the continents. Terrestrial existence felt like the expected biological destiny. Yet, standing at the edge of the Tethys Sea during the Eocene epoch, a small four-legged mammal was about to disrupt that assumed logic. A retreat into the aquatic realm seems counterintuitive from a traditional perspective. Why abandon the sunlit forests, the rich vegetation, and the stable ground? Nature operates without foresight or predetermined goals. Ecological opportunity drives all biological change. The shallow coastal waters teemed with abundant, untapped food resources. Fish, crustaceans, and mollusks thrived in the sunlit shallows, free from mammalian predators. Hunger, curiosity, and immense evolutionary pressure converged at this very shoreline. By stepping into the briny water, this terrestrial creature initiated a rebellion against its own anatomical heritage. Recognizing this ancient pivot stands as a major achievement of modern human intellect. Humans exist as deeply rooted terrestrial beings, bound to the solid earth and reliant on the atmosphere to breathe. Our eyes and ears are perfectly calibrated for the surface world. Still, our minds possess the astonishing capacity to transcend these biological limitations. Through rigorous scientific inquiry, researchers have learned to read the stories etched into the crust of our planet. Paleontologists scour desolate deserts that were once vibrant seafloors, searching for fragments of ancient truth. By analyzing the isotopic composition of fossilized teeth, scientists can measure the precise ratios of oxygen, determining whether an animal drank fresh water from a river or salt water from the sea. We measure the atomic signatures of deep time and rebuild extinct ecosystems using mathematics, geology, and evolutionary biology. Far from being insignificant observers in a vast universe, human beings are the conscious architects of history. They give voice to epochs that fell silent millions of years ago. The realization that a hoofed mammal once waded into the ocean and eventually transformed into a leviathan demonstrates the power of scientific curiosity. Scientists do not just look at bones, they reconstruct the mechanics of life itself. A world without ice is dominated by vibrant biological energy. Ocean currents circulated heat with incredible efficiency throughout the Eocene, creating a remarkably stable global climate. Palm trees flourished in latitudes that are now locked in solid permafrost. The seas themselves were distinct from modern oceans, lacking the frigid, nutrient-dense upwellings characteristic of today. This warm, global incubator provided the perfect conditions for evolutionary experimentation. Furthermore, the shoreline acted as an unparalleled crucible for innovation. Transitional areas between two different biomes frequently harbor the highest levels of biodiversity. Tides constantly reshaped the muddy flats, stranding marine life and exposing hidden resources. For a sharp-minded mammal equipped with acute senses and an adaptable digestive system, the shallow waters presented an irresistible lure. Water laps gently against the muddy bank. A warm breeze carries the scent of decaying vegetation and salt spray. An animal approaches the water edge. This creature, adapted for running through the dense Eocene underbrush, possesses a long snout, a slender body, and distinct hooves on its toes. Pausing at the boundary, it hesitates. Instincts forged over millions of terrestrial generations warn against the deep. Predators lurk beneath the reflective surface. However, the promise of sustenance overcomes ancient caution. The first step breaks the surface tension. Mud swirls around slender ankles. Cool liquid envelops fur, immediately changing the sensory feedback looping to the brain. Every subsequent step forward represents a profound initiation. This ritual of submergence marks the beginning of a transformation that will span dozens of millions of years. As the water rises higher along its flanks, the animal must adjust its balance. The firm resistance of solid earth gives way to the yielding, dynamic pressure of the tide. Walking becomes wading. Wading gradually evolves into swimming. The creature paddles awkwardly, its terrestrial limbs fighting against the density of the liquid environment. It captures a fish, clamping its jaws shut before retreating to the safety of the dry bank to consume its prize. Tomorrow, it will return. Successive generations will venture further, stay longer, and dive deeper. The shoreline slowly ceases to be a barrier and instead becomes a gateway. Consider the psychological and physiological demands of leaving the shore. A terrestrial animal relies on a deeply ingrained spatial awareness built around a flat, two-dimensional plane of movement. When escaping danger, it typically involves running away horizontally or climbing vertically into a tree. Entering the water introduces a three-dimensional battleground. Threats can materialize from below, ascending rapidly from the murky depths. Predators might strike from above. The structural geometry of survival completely changes. The brain must rewire its processing pathways to navigate a volumetric space rather than a planar one. The ability to trace this cognitive and physical rewiring showcases the brilliant investigative nature of modern science. When an evolutionary biologist examines the fossilized cranium of a transitional mammal, they are not merely looking at calcium phosphate. They are reading a biological diary. The shifting position of inner ear bones reveals how an animal began to perceive underwater acoustics. Changes in jaw structure indicate new methods of capturing slippery, aquatic prey. Human researchers deploy high-resolution computed tomography scans to peer inside solid rock, digitally extracting fragile internal structures without causing a single scratch to the priceless specimen. By reconstructing extinct nervous systems, scientists deduce how these pioneering creatures experienced their shifting reality. This level of understanding elevates humanity. We are the first species capable of deciphering the grand narrative of life on Earth. The step into the water fundamentally alters the destiny of this lineage. Gravity loses its dominance. Buoyancy offers a new kind of physical freedom, allowing for eventual increases in body mass that would be impossible on land. The initiation ritual in the Eocene shallows sets the stage for the creation of the largest biological entities to ever exist on this planet. Yet, at this precise moment, there are no giants. There is only a small, hooved predator wading into the unknown. The water closes around its legs, signaling the start of a profound physical and ecological metamorphosis. The solid earth is left behind. A spectacular journey into the fluid cosmos is about to unfold. Human intuition traditionally plots a vastly different cartography for marine giants. We construct an inherited conceptual framework based on superficial observation, creating an old map drawn by instinct, which assumes oceanic leviathans must originate within pelagic zones. Imagination naturally places the genesis of sea monsters deep within trench ecosystems or sprawling abyssal plains. Logic seemingly dictates that aquatic titans are born directly from the dark waters they inhabit. Science, however, illuminates a far more astonishing reality and dismantles this intuitive geography. Paleontological deduction reveals that the biological blueprint for these aquatic behemoths was drafted inland. Modern researchers have meticulously rewritten this archaic map, proving that the most massive organisms ever to grace our planet began their lineage as nimble terrestrial runners. The correction of this fundamental geographical misunderstanding highlights the extraordinary capacity of human reasoning. We do not merely accept inherited myths regarding the natural world. Scientists actively excavate truth from the solid bedrock, tracing an ancestral lineage back to sun-baked riverbanks rather than bottomless ocean trenches. Decades of relentless fieldwork in the arid mountains of modern Pakistan yielded a crucial fragment of this evolutionary puzzle. Geologists and biologists converging on the Kuldana Formation found themselves standing atop sedimentary rock that once formed the lush margin of the ancient Tethys Sea. Within these ruddy, iron-rich layers, an extraordinary relic awaited discovery. Researchers unearthed a localized, fragmented cranium belonging to an animal foreign to modern taxonomy. Named Pachycetus, this early Eocene predator superficially resembled a long-snouted wolf, possessing distinct, hooved toes. Visual inspection alone would never connect this slender, land-bound carnivore to the immense filter feeders navigating contemporary oceans. Its skeletal proportions suggest a life spent running through dense vegetation and scavenging along muddy river channels. Yet, scientific inquiry operates far beneath superficial appearances. Paleontologists applying rigorous comparative anatomy bypassed the familiar limb structures and focused intently on the cranial architecture. To find the connection between a hoofed runner and a streamlined swimmer required looking past outward aesthetics and investigating how the creature processed its surrounding environment. Careful excavation centered upon the auditory region situated at the very base of the skull. Here lies a definitive signature uniting every single whale, dolphin, and porpoise across 50 million years of vertebrate history. Terrestrial mammals possess a hollow, shell-like structure enclosing the middle ear, optimized for amplifying airborne sound waves. Pachycetus featured a startling modification to this standard mammalian anatomy. One specific side of the tympanic bulla had thickened into a remarkably dense, heavy mass of bone known scientifically as the involucrum. The discovery of this highly specialized anatomical marker in a four-legged terrestrial fossil represented a monumental breakthrough for evolutionary biology. Only cetaceans grow an involucrum. Finding this exact structure inside a wolf-like skull definitively anchored the origin of whales to the artiodactyl family tree, alongside hippopotamuses and deer. Deciphering such a microscopic anatomical detail from compressed, mineralized rock demonstrates the sheer brilliance of human scientific methodology. Researchers read a subtle language written in fossilized calcium, bridging a gap between disparate ecosystems. An examination of the precise function of the involucrum unlocks a profound understanding regarding sensory mechanics and environmental adaptation. Acoustic physics dictate that sound behaves differently depending on the medium it travels through. Airborne acoustic waves reflect almost completely when striking a water surface due to an extreme mismatch in acoustic impedance. Conversely, once an animal submerges its head, sound waves traveling through the liquid pass directly into its bodily tissues without interruption. Flesh and water share nearly identical densities, offering no resistance to the incoming vibrations. For a standard terrestrial mammal dunking its head beneath a river surface, directional hearing collapses into chaotic noise. Vibrations strike both inner ears simultaneously, making it practically impossible to determine whether a splashing fish is located to the left or the right. Pachycetus circumvented this paralyzing acoustic confusion through an ingenious mechanism known as bone conduction. By resting its lower jaw against the riverbed or submerging its chin just below the surface, the animal allowed vibrations to travel directly through the dense jawbone straight to the involucrum. This specialized, heavy bone acted as an internal seismic receiver, vibrating independently from the rest of the skull. Human intellect reconstructs this invisible phenomenon with precision, allowing us to comprehend how an extinct predator listened to its prey moving through murky current. Understanding this process elevates our appreciation for the relentless ingenuity of natural selection. By examining microscopic striations on fossilized teeth, chemists have further confirmed that Pachycetus drank exclusively fresh water, proving these animals hunted in inland rivers rather than the open, salty ocean. These creatures lived at the edge of two worlds, possessing an ear uniquely built to straddle the acoustic divide between air and liquid. Transitioning across this ecological doorway required navigating a phase of sensory disorientation. To leave dry land meant deliberately abandoning highly reliable, familiar environmental feedback. Optical clarity warps immediately upon submersion as light refracts, colors distort, and distance becomes nearly impossible to judge through suspended particulate matter. Olfactory senses, deeply vital for mammalian tracking and communication, become useless once water floods the delicate nasal passages. A creature entering the fluid ecosystem is forced to surrender a massive portion of the sensory toolkit refined over millions of terrestrial generations. The embrace of these murky river channels demanded immense behavioral plasticity and an unprecedented level of neurological adaptability. Standing directly on this sensory threshold, Pachycetus tested a biological prototype that would eventually conquer the global ocean. Plunging into the dark water induced a temporary sensory scrambling, a chaotic overlap of familiar airborne instincts, failing against fluid dynamics. Every successful hunt in the shallows required the animal to ignore its compromised vision and rely increasingly on the newly developing acoustic pathways vibrating through its jaw. Pushing through this initial confusion and adapting to a muted, physically demanding reality allowed this coastal walker to pry open an evolutionary gateway. Every subsequent anatomical modification over the coming epochs would serve to perfect this initial, hesitant plunge into a radically different physics engine. Humanity stands uniquely capable of appreciating this courage and biological flexibility. We meticulously map the precise stepping stones leading from a sunlit riverbank into an immersive, volumetric reality. Our instruments and analytical models revive the daily existence of an animal that has not drawn breath for 50 million years. We visualize the Pachycetus waiting silently along the riverbank, shifting its weight onto hooved toes before sliding silently into the warm Eocene waters. Its dense ear bones sink heavily, acting as an acoustic anchor, linking the mammalian brain to the rhythmic vibrations of swimming prey. This creature did not know it was initiating an anatomical dynasty. It simply sought sustenance in a new dimension, driven by the universal biological imperative to thrive where others could not. Observation of this transitional phase challenges our definitions of adaptation and survival. The transformation did not happen overnight, through dramatic mutation, but rather through countless generations pushing slightly further into the liquid margin. As these terrestrial hunters spent increasing amounts of time submerged, the physical demands of wading and paddling began to exert an invisible pressure upon their skeletal frames. Natural selection favors efficiency above all else. Thick fur designed for insulation on land creates immense drag when dragging through a dense current. Limbs built for bearing weight and absorbing the impact of running find themselves poorly suited for generating continuous forward thrust in water. The biological architecture required for a fully aquatic existence remains drastically different from the bodily geometry needed to sprint across a floodplain. The tracking of these gradual shifts reveals a narrative of form meeting function. The environment demands conformity, and biology responds with innovation over deep time. Recognizing the involucrum as the first key turning inside the lock of aquatic evolution grants us a profound perspective on how life diversifies. A dense piece of auditory bone became the foundational anchor for a complete anatomical overhaul. This riverbank served as a staging ground, a quiet laboratory where nature tested the viability of a mammalian submarine. The coastal walker succeeded in its immediate environment, thriving among the freshwater streams of a lost continent. However, the genetic potential unlocked by adapting to an aquatic lifestyle could not be contained within shallow inland waters. The biological momentum had shifted permanently. Far greater changes were actively brewing on the evolutionary horizon as the Eocene epoch progressed. The doorway had been successfully breached, but the hallway extending beyond it led into increasingly alien territory. Deeper waters beckoned, harboring vastly different prey, intense atmospheric pressures, and new thermodynamic challenges. To permanently leave the riverbanks and fully commit to the open sea, the ancestral whale would have to sever its final ties to the solid earth. It would need to reshape its body to match the relentless, fluid demands of the pelagic zone. A radical anatomical reinvention was rapidly approaching, poised to stretch the mammalian form into shapes previously unimaginable. 10 million years later, the biological mandate had shifted dramatically. By 40 million years ago, the hesitations of those early coastal waders had vanished into deep time. A search for the ultimate expression of this evolutionary leap brings modern scientists to an unexpected location. Wind sculpts towering sandstone monuments across the arid expanse of Wadi al-Hitan in modern Egypt. Here, amidst the scorching heat of the Sahara, researchers traverse a dry valley floor that once formed the vibrant, submerged heart of the ancient Tethys Sea. Bleached by the relentless desert sun, massive fossilized vertebrae emerge directly from the yellow sand. These cylindrical stones trace the outline of a predator so enormous that 19th century naturalists initially mistook it for an extinct sea serpent. They named the enigmatic beast Basilosaurus, meaning king lizard, misinterpreting its taxonomic lineage. Yet, rigorous scientific scrutiny soon corrected this historical error. By meticulously analyzing precise dental arrangements and cranial sutures, anatomists proved that this serpentine giant was no reptile. It was a warm-blooded mammal, representing the pinnacle of early cetacean design. The decoding of such biological truths from scattered desert stones highlights the remarkable precision of human deduction. We look at a barren, waterless wasteland and accurately reconstruct a thriving prehistoric ocean brimming with leviathans. Expanding its spinal column to nearly 20 meters, Basilosaurus exhibited a body plan unprecedented in mammalian history. Attaining such massive proportions required an extreme biomechanical overhaul. Most terrestrial mammals share a strictly conserved number of vertebrae, severely limiting their capacity for extreme elongation. Rather than merely multiplying the sheer number of bones in its back, this creature achieved its serpentine profile by stretching the individual vertebrae themselves. Each spinal segment elongated into a dense tubular cylinder, creating an incredibly long and highly flexible torso. Watching this apex predator navigate the coastal waters would have been a mesmerizing spectacle. Fish and marine reptiles propel themselves using a side-to-side, lateral motion, swishing their tails left and right. Basilosaurus moved differently. Bound by its ancient mammalian heritage, its spine flexed vertically, the creature drove itself forward through a powerful up-and-down undulation, mirroring the galloping motion its ancestors once used to sprint across prehistoric floodplains. Biologists working with digital fluid dynamics map the precise wave mechanics rippling down that massive vertebral column, demonstrating how ancient running gaits transformed smoothly into aquatic propulsion. Survival in the open sea demanded a permanent physical sacrifice. Returning to dry land had become an anatomical impossibility. The front limbs morphed into broad, flat hydrofoils, engineered for steering and stabilizing the immense animal rather than bearing weight. Far more dramatic, however, was the fate of the rear legs. Tucked away near the very end of its elongated body, the hind limbs had shrunk to mere vestiges barely the size of a human arm. Decoupled from the spinal column, these tiny remnants possessed intact kneecaps and miniature toes, acting as silent anatomical echoes of a forgotten terrestrial life. They could no longer support even a fraction of the animal's colossal mass. This structural detachment represents a definitive point of no return. The physical tether linking the mammal to the shoreline was officially severed. To escape the gravitational tyranny of the land meant giving up the ability to ever walk, rest, or give birth on solid ground again. Reproduction had to occur submerged, requiring newborn calves to swim to the surface for their first breath. Evolution traded the familiar safety of the terrestrial nest for the fluid freedom of the ocean current. A complete surrender to a liquid environment alters the fundamental rules of biological engineering. Gravity dictates every structural limit for terrestrial fauna, demanding thick, pillar-like legs and robust joints to prevent internal collapse. Buoyancy, conversely, acts as an invisible cradle. Water supports biological mass effortlessly, allowing tissue and muscle to expand far beyond terrestrial limits. Taking advantage of this newly discovered physical freedom, Basilosaurus grew into an undisputed apex predator of the late Eocene. Still, adapting to fluid dynamics introduced a different set of mechanical challenges. Lungs filled with massive volumes of air naturally force an air-breathing animal to float to the surface. To remain submerged requires immense physical effort unless counteracted by internal ballast. To solve this buoyant dilemma, the creature developed extraordinarily dense, heavy bones, a condition known scientifically as pachyostosis. This dense skeletal framework weighed the massive animal down, allowing it to glide stealthily through the shallow coastal seas without constantly fighting an upward drift. Human intellect brings this invisible mechanism into the light. By measuring the specific gravity of these fossilized ribs, paleontologists determine how this extinct hunter maintained neutral buoyancy, hovering silently in the water column before ambushing its prey. The navigation of this evolutionary path transformed the animal into both a supreme master and a lifelong captive of the pelagic zone. Within its liquid domain, it possessed no equal. Its elongated jaws, packed with remarkably precise shearing teeth, could easily dismantle any contemporary marine species. The body geometry had adapted to slice through water with minimal resistance, transforming a cumbersome terrestrial runner into a streamlined biological torpedo. Absolute dominance reigned beneath the waves. However, washing ashore meant certain death. Beached on a sandbar, the creature would slowly asphyxiate, its organs compressing fatally under the immense weight of its own unsupported blubber and muscle. The very anatomical traits ensuring its oceanic supremacy rendered it helpless in the atmosphere its ancestors once conquered. Biology is a strict negotiator, demanding absolute commitment in exchange for ecological dominance. Tracing this irreversible commitment inspires awe for the resilience and plasticity of life on Earth. Science, grants us the ability to witness an entire species rewriting its own physiological destiny across deep time. We piece together crushed ribs and scattered teeth, rebuilding a creature that dared to abandon the solid earth forever. When human researchers recognize the significance of a detached pelvis or a thickened vertebrae, they can chart the timeline of a biological revolution. Our minds bridge the chasm between a hoofed runner and an obligate marine giant. We understand that adaptation functions as a continuous, dynamic conversation between biology and geography. Basilosaurus successfully negotiated a surrender to the ocean, discarding useless appendages while embracing a new geometric reality. The conquest of the shallow seas represented a magnificent achievement, yet it remained a highly localized victory. The Eocene waters continued to be remarkably warm, relatively shallow, and bathed in abundant sunlight. This immense predator navigated utilizing excellent eyesight, hunting in illuminated coastal shelves where visibility remained high and prey was plentiful. The dark, abyssal trenches still lay out of reach, inhospitable to an animal relying on solar illumination to track its meals. To survive in the sunlit shallows required sheer size, muscular power, and sharp teeth. The crushing, pitch-black depths, however, demanded a different kind of sensory revolution. Unseen by the majestic leviathans swimming through the Tethys Sea, the global climate was preparing to shift drastically. The oceans were slowly beginning to cool, threatening the stable coastal incubators that nurtured these early giants. To survive the impending climatic upheaval, the cetacean lineage would need to dive deeper, venturing far beyond the reach of light. They would have to conquer the pitch-black void, forcing their biology to invent a new way of mapping the unseen world. Photons colliding with dense water molecules lose their kinetic energy almost immediately upon entering the ocean. Red wavelengths vanish within the first few meters, followed rapidly by yellow, green, and eventually blue. Plunging past the mesopelagic zone, solar radiation extinguishes, leaving an environment devoid of any optical stimuli. Relying on visual acuity in such a habitat yields absolutely no evolutionary advantage. Biological energy invested in maintaining massive retinas or hypersensitive pupils results in severe diminishing returns when blackness reigns supreme. Any aspiring marine predator hoping to follow retreating prey into these deeper, colder realms faced an imposing sensory barrier. The defeat of this biological roadblock demanded a profound departure from the light-dependent navigation that had guided vertebrate life for 500 million years. Biology needed to engineer an alternative method for deciphering physical space without relying on the sun. Human beings perceive the universe almost exclusively by interpreting light waves bouncing off solid surfaces. To grasp the reality of a creature that maps its world using only pressure waves requires a deliberate expansion of our conceptual framework. Imagine standing at the center of an unlit subterranean cavern. Your optic nerves strain, but the brain registers nothing but an impenetrable void. Now, picture yourself violently tossing a handful of hard, ceramic marbles outward against the unseen walls. As those tiny spheres strike the surrounding stone, the returning clatter reaches your ears at varying intervals. A sharp, immediate crack alerts you to a barrier mere inches from your face. A faint, highly delayed rattle reveals a distant corridor stretching far into the distance. Through sheer auditory calculation, your mind constructs a rudimentary, invisible geometry of the cavern based on the time delay of sound. Early toothed whales, recognized scientifically as odontocetes, internalized this precise mechanical principle, transforming their cranial architecture into a hyper-advanced bioacoustic engine. The generation of those microscopic sonic marbles underwater necessitated a brilliant contortion of the mammalian skull. Bones that once formed a rigid, terrestrial snout began to slide backward, overlapping the brain case in a radical anatomical restructuring paleontologists refer to as telescoping. Through this gradual shifting of calcium and cartilage, the nasal passages migrated from the very tip of the face to the highest point of the head. Hidden just beneath this highly muscular blowhole, a complex system of internal air sacs and fleshy valves emerged. By forcing pressurized air through tightly constricted anatomical structures called phonic lips, these oceanic navigators produced sharp, incredibly rapid, high-frequency clicks, producing powerful sound waves without utilizing vocal cords or releasing escaping air bubbles, allowed these animals to vocalize efficiently while holding their breath under extreme hydrostatic pressure. A simple loud noise proves drastically insufficient for pinpointing elusive prey. Unfocused acoustic waves disperse wildly in all directions, losing vital kinetic energy across the vast liquid expanse. Natural selection solved this thermodynamic dilemma by engineering a localized organic lens resting directly upon the animal's forehead. Composed of highly specialized, low-density lipids, this bulbous organ acts exactly like a glass prism bending a beam of visible light. Chemists, analyzing these biological structures, discovered unique compounds such as isovaleric acid, synthesized by cetaceans to achieve a highly specific refractive index. Because this distinct fatty tissue possesses the exact acoustic impedance of surrounding seawater, outgoing sound vibrations do not bounce backward off the skin. They glide seamlessly through the lipid structure, bending and concentrating into a tight directional acoustic laser, projecting straight into the pitch-black water. The projection of these high-frequency pulses represents only half of the echolocation equation. Capturing the infinitely faint, returning echoes requires a biological receiver possessing unmatched sensitivity. Milliseconds after a click strikes a distant squid, the wave bounces back, carrying heavily modified spatial data regarding the speed, density, and trajectory of the target. To capture this whisper of information, the ancestral lower jaw hollowed out significantly. A long, cavernous channel extending deep into the mandible filled with specialized acoustic fat, connecting directly to the auditory bulla hidden deep within the skull. This delicate lipid highway snags incoming vibrations directly from the water column, bypassing the traditional outer ear and funnels them flawlessly into the inner ear mechanism. The processing of millions of returning echoes per minute demands immense computational power. A sophisticated biological sonar system capable of producing hundreds of clicks per second generates a tidal wave of continuous neurological data. Consequently, the cetacean brain expanded rapidly in size and internal complexity. The neocortex folded extensively upon itself, drastically enlarging the neurological regions responsible for high-speed auditory processing. These marine mammals were no longer simply hearing vague shapes in the dark. Through the use of high-frequency sound waves that physically penetrate soft biological tissue, they effectively scanned the internal anatomy of their environment. An echolocating whale perceives the skeletal density, the inflating swim bladders, and the beating hearts of its prey concealed behind a curtain of total darkness. They constructed high-definition, three-dimensional holographic models of reality using nothing but vibrating water molecules. The discovery of this hidden sensory dimension stands as a monumental triumph of modern scientific investigation. Marine biologists boldly deploy high-fidelity hydrophones into freezing abyssal trenches, recording intricate symphonies of buzzes and whistles that elude raw human hearing. Advanced computer algorithms slow down and decode these rapid-fire acoustic emissions, revealing a sophisticated predatory strategy synchronized over vast distances. Non-invasive computed microtomography allows scientists to peer deeply into the cranial vaults of extinct odontocetes, digitally mapping the sprawling neural networks once dedicated to echolocation. Dedicating decades to understanding how an ancient terrestrial skull folded onto itself demonstrates the reach of human reasoning. When researchers translate an alien, acoustic reality into mathematical graphs and visual data, they bridge a profound sensory divide spanning tens of millions of years. We do not just observe nature from afar. We mathematically reconstruct the invisible forces that shaped the evolution of intelligence. Mastery of this biological sonar permanently liberated the odontocetes from the sunlit surface zones. Gaining unrestricted access to the bathypelagic realms allowed them to colonize the most massive, unexplored biome on the planet. By plunging miles beneath the crashing waves, these creatures hunted effectively in realms where water pressure crushes conventional air-filled cavities. Echolocation enabled them to track erratic prey through chaotic ocean currents, identifying small, fast-moving targets from hundreds of meters away with surgical precision. This acoustic network fostered a profoundly intricate social tapestry, transcending its primary function as a hunting tool. Pods coordinated movements over vast distances, sharing highly detailed spatial data and synchronizing complex tactical maneuvers through the abyss. They engineered a dynamic, invisible language specifically calibrated for navigating the deep ocean. The equipment of high-definition sonar transformed these mammals into the most formidable and adaptable navigators the ocean had ever hosted. Unhindered by the loss of solar illumination, they proliferated wildly, diversifying into numerous specialized lineages tuned to exploit rich, deep-water biological reserves. The evolution of such a spectacular neurological tool guaranteed their survival against the impending climatic upheaval. Yet, mastering the deep sea inadvertently set the stage for an unprecedented ecological collision. Global ocean currents were shifting rapidly during the upcoming epoch, altering the worldwide distribution of vital marine nutrients. Warm, highly productive tropical waters began to retreat toward the equator. Massive volumes of ice started to accumulate heavily at the poles, fundamentally rewriting the thermodynamic balance of the planet. As the dramatically cooling climate condensed global food supplies into tightly packed, contested oceanic zones, these brilliant acoustic hunters swam directly toward an inevitable clash. When entering the Miocene epoch roughly 23 million years ago, the planet underwent a profound thermodynamic reorganization. Continental drift finally severed the ancient land bridge connecting South America and Antarctica, tearing open a massive geographic gateway known today as the Drake Passage. Rushing violently into this new expanse, a relentless circumpolar current isolated the southern continent, plunging the landmass into a deep, permanent freeze. Ice caps rapidly expanded across terrestrial surfaces, locking away vast quantities of fresh water and fundamentally altering global ocean circulation patterns. Warm, stagnant waters characteristic of previous eras vanished. Frigid, heavy currents began sinking toward the abyssal plains, traveling across the ocean floor only to be pushed aggressively upward when striking steep continental shelves. Shifting wind patterns that swept surface waters offshore propelled these deep-sea upwellings, dragging centuries of accumulated organic detritus and rich minerals directly toward the sunlit surface. Nutrient distribution transformed radically under these modified physical parameters. Previously, marine life thrived in widespread, relatively uniform, shallow coastal incubators. Now, biological productivity became fiercely localized. Massive blooms of microscopic phytoplankton erupted exclusively within these concentrated upwelling zones, multiplying exponentially on the sudden influx of deep-water phosphorus and nitrogen. Entire global food webs compressed geographically to exploit these sudden bursts of sustenance. Billions of tons of krill, schooling fish, and small marine invertebrates gathered tightly within these chilled, nutrient-dense pockets. Consequently, vast stretches of the open ocean turned into biological deserts, lacking the necessary biomass to support enormous predators. To survive this shifting ecological paradigm required apex hunters to migrate continuously, tracking localized explosions of life across an increasingly fragmented oceanic landscape. The maintenance of a colossal physical frame demands absolute adherence to strict caloric mathematics. Large predatory marine species operate essentially as massive biological engines, requiring a continuous, heavy influx of fuel simply to sustain their baseline metabolic rate. A swim across thousands of miles of barren, open water burns tremendous amounts of kinetic energy. To reach a rich, upwelling zone necessitates an immediate and overwhelming nutritional return to offset the immense energetic cost of the journey. If an apex hunter expends more kilojoules searching for sustenance than it consumes upon arrival, the deficit rapidly leads to starvation. Mathematics governs biological survival with unforgiving precision. Every powerful tail stroke, every rapid acoustic click, and every aggressive burst of acceleration drains the vital energy reserves stored within thick layers of blubber. For the giant hunters patrolling the Miocene waters, these concentrated feeding grounds represented absolute necessities rather than mere biological conveniences. Deciphering the invisible contours of these ancient ocean currents showcases the spectacular deductive capability of modern paleoclimatology. Researchers do not rely on guesswork to reconstruct weather patterns from 20 million years ago. Geologists deploy heavily modified drill ships to extract long, cylindrical sediment cores directly from the deepest abyssal plains. Trapped tightly within these compacted layers of oceanic mud lie the microscopic fossilized shells of foraminifera. These tiny organisms incorporate specific chemical signatures from the surrounding seawater directly into their calcium carbonate architecture. By carefully isolating these microscopic shells and feeding them through advanced mass spectrometers, scientists measure the precise ratio of oxygen isotopes embedded within the ancient calcium. Heavier isotopes indicate much colder periods, allowing human minds to mathematically graph how sea temperatures fluctuated across deep time. Our analytical models read the frozen temperature of a forgotten ocean trapped inside a microscopic shell. The mapping of these ancient cold water upwellings reveals a stunning biological truth. We can see where the global food supply concentrated, dictating the precise geographic coordinates where ancient predators were ultimately forced to congregate. Drawn irresistibly by the magnetic pull of abundant prey, highly advanced odontocetes arrived at these concentrated feeding zones armed with formidable sensory weapons. Extinct lineages of massive raptorial sperm whales navigated the shifting currents, employing their sophisticated echolocation to detect dense shoals of prey from extraordinary distances. Equipped with large, interlocking teeth and incredibly powerful jaws, these mammalian hunters operated as intelligent, coordinated apex predators. Their advanced neocortex allowed for complex social interactions, facilitating synchronized pod formations to corral agile prey within the churning, nutrient-rich waters. The biological sonar that once liberated their ancestors from the sunlit shallows now served as an ultimate tracking mechanism, guiding them flawlessly through the murky, plankton-thickened upwellings. Cetacean intelligence reached new heights of tactical sophistication to exploit localized bounties. By utilizing specialized acoustic frequencies, they could easily distinguish the dense, muscular profiles of large fish amidst the chaotic background noise of a turbulent ocean. Mammalian metabolism generated tremendous internal heat, allowing these animals to dive deeply into the frigid currents without losing any muscular function. Insulated heavily by thick layers of highly vascularized blubber, they outmaneuvered cold-blooded prey with explosive speed and calculated precision. Adaptation to the Miocene environment meant thriving in a hyper-competitive arena where sensory superiority frequently dictated the margin between life and death. Early toothed whales conquered the acoustic dimension, establishing themselves as monarchs of mammalian predatory design. Mammalian lineages, however, did not hold exclusive rights to these vital oceanic buffets. A different biological dynasty had been quietly perfecting its own lethal architecture long before the first hoofed terrestrial creature ever touched saltwater. For hundreds of millions of years, cartilaginous fishes patrolled the globe, continuously refining a body plan optimized for aquatic slaughter. Unburdened by the mammalian requirements of breathing atmospheric air or maintaining an internal high-temperature metabolism, ancient sharks represented the pinnacle of physiological efficiency. As highly streamlined, solitary hunters, they relied on different sensory arrays to interpret their surrounding environment. Instead of transmitting acoustic clicks, they utilized highly sensitive electroreceptors embedded directly in their snouts to detect faint electrical impulses generated by a beating heart or a flexing muscle. The formidable ancestors of the giant megatooth sharks navigated toward the exact same nutrient-dense upwellings, converging on the condensed food web. Without dense bone, their lightweight cartilaginous skeletons allowed them to grow to magnificent proportions while conserving vital kinetic energy. Their predatory strategy relied not on coordinated pack tactics or complex acoustic communication, but on raw, unadulterated, solitary power. These ancient sharks sensed low-frequency vibrations of thrashing prey or the metallic tang of blood dispersing miles away through the water column, gravitating toward localized blooms of marine life. To fuel their massive frames required monumental amounts of sustenance, locking them into the identical caloric mathematics that strictly governed the mammalian hunters. Driven entirely by biological necessity, two drastically different evolutionary paths found themselves set on an unalterable collision course. The sharing of a vast ecosystem requires a delicate balance of biological niches, a condition easily maintained when food remains plentiful and widely distributed. Shrinking resource pools during the Miocene epoch shattered this peaceful separation. The compression of billions of tons of biomass into localized pockets eliminated the luxury of spatial avoidance. Massive raptorial sperm whales and colossal cartilaginous sharks suddenly found themselves patrolling the exact same geographic coordinates, hunting the identical localized prey. Geography forced an unprecedented ecological intersection between mammalian ingenuity and ancient cartilaginous perfection. To understand this impending biological intersection illustrates how far human curiosity can reach. Biologists and paleontologists painstakingly examine deep-sea fossil beds located in modern-day Peru and Chile, uncovering densely packed graveyards where the bones of early whales mingle intimately with fossilized shark teeth the size of a human hand. By studying these scattered remains, scientists reconstruct a vibrant, contested ancient battleground. Through advanced digital modeling, we analyze deep gouges etched into fossilized whale ribs, comparing serrated microscopic scratches against the dental architecture of giant sharks. Our analytical frameworks resurrect the precise mechanics of prehistoric interactions, bringing a hidden epoch into razor-sharp focus. The translation of shattered bone into a comprehensive understanding of extinct trophic webs demonstrates the unparalleled analytical power of the human mind. Every drop of the Miocene ocean buzzed with kinetic tension. Biological systems demanded maximum efficiency just to survive the season. Odontocetes possessed superior intelligence, high-speed acoustic mapping, and complex social structures. Giant sharks possessed sheer solitary mass, lethal ambush tactics, and an evolutionary pedigree honed perfectly over deep time. As the global climate continued cooling and upwelling zones grew increasingly crowded, the ocean simply could not sustain two distinct apex predators operating at the peak of their respective evolutionary trajectories. To support immense bodily mass within confined feeding grounds required tremendous caloric intake, guaranteeing a relentless competition for survival. Deep beneath the crashing waves of the localized upwellings, the stage was perfectly set for one of the most spectacular biological rivalries in the history of the planet. Two distinct lineages of apex predators crossed paths within these concentrated feeding zones, turning the chilled upwellings into the most fiercely contested arenas in planetary history. On one side stood the zenith of cartilaginous evolution. Taxonomists identify this titanic shark as Otodus megalodon. Reaching lengths exceeding 15 meters, this colossal fish commanded a physical presence rarely equaled across 500 million years of vertebrate development. Instead of relying on complex social networks or high-frequency vocalizations, the giant shark operated as an autonomous biological dreadnought. Its cartilaginous skeleton allowed for explosive bursts of acceleration while maintaining a relatively lightweight overall frame. Hidden beneath a broad, muscular snout, rows of heavily serrated, triangular teeth formed a jaw capable of exerting a crushing pressure unmatched by any contemporary terrestrial or marine carnivore. Modern software algorithms simulate extreme stress distribution across fossilized jawbones with stunning accuracy. Computer models generated by biomechanical engineers calculate that a mature adult could cleanly sever dense vertebrate bone with tens of thousands of newtons of pressure. The extraction of invisible kinetic forces from petrified calcium highlights the staggering deductive capability of modern science. Researchers do not merely measure fossils, they mathematically resurrect extinct muscular geometry. To comprehend such phenomenal biomechanics requires no sensationalism, as the raw mathematical data alone inspires awe. Megalodon did not need to hunt in packs or utilize acoustic sonar. Solitary ambush tactics served as its primary mechanism for securing vital calories. The giant cruised silently below the turbulent upwellings, relying on its dark dorsal coloration to blend perfectly with the deep water, scanning the illuminated column above for the unmistakable silhouette of a surfacing marine mammal. Furthermore, highly sensitive electroreceptors embedded directly within its snout allowed the shark to passively detect the faint electrical impulses generated by a beating heart from extraordinary distances. In contrast to this silent, solitary approach, a radically different form of predatory architecture patrolled the exact same oceanic coordinates. Among the early toothed whales, one specific genus embodied the absolute peak of mammalian carnivorous design. Named Leviathan melvilli, this raptorial sperm whale matched the giant shark in sheer physical scale, but brought a distinct biological arsenal to the contested feeding grounds. Housed within a massive, deeply excavated skull, its upper and lower jaws bore interlocking, conical teeth frequently measuring over a foot in length. These colossal ivory spikes represent the largest functional teeth ever grown by any known animal. To capture prey with such immense dental hardware required a different kinetic strategy than a cartilaginous bite. Rather than shearing massive chunks of flesh through lateral head shaking, Leviathan utilized profound muscular torsion to seize, crush, and dismantle its targets through raw, blunt force. Beyond mere dental mechanics, mammalian biology equipped these whales with a neurological advantage that reshaped oceanic hunting. Warm-blooded metabolism fueled sprawling, highly convoluted brains capable of processing immense streams of sensory data simultaneously. Pack coordination emerged as a devastatingly effective strategy against massive prey. These raptorial whales operated in tightly synchronized pods, actively communicating through complex acoustic channels, orchestrating sophisticated ambush maneuvers that easily isolated vulnerable targets from protective pods. Echolocation allowed them to track erratic prey trajectories with pinpoint accuracy, coordinating strikes from multiple angles within the murky, plankton-rich waters. While a solitary shark relied heavily on a single, catastrophic initial bite, a pod of Leviathan dismantled their targets through organized, relentless tactical pressure. We comprehend these complex prehistoric behaviors by studying modern cetacean descendants and applying robust comparative neurobiology. Human researchers chart fossilized cranial capacities, accurately mapping the neurological pathways once dedicated to high-speed acoustic processing and social cohesion. The reconstruction of a complex, cooperative hunting strategy from mineralized skulls demonstrates the extraordinary reach of scientific deduction. Our minds bridge millions of years of silence, allowing us to accurately visualize highly intelligent mammals coordinating intricate attacks within the ancient currents. Collisions between these two biological superpowers were inevitable within the densely packed Miocene upwellings. Fossil beds stretching across the arid Atacama Desert harbor the physical remnants of these frequent encounters. Paleontologists meticulously excavating the Pisco Formation frequently uncover the monumental teeth of both Megalodon and Leviathan, resting peacefully within the exact same sedimentary layers. Scattered among these apex weapons lie the shattered, heavily scarred ribs of smaller baleen whales. An analysis of the deep gouges etched into these bones reveals distinct bite signatures belonging definitively to both predators. Such discoveries paint a vivid picture of a highly competitive marine ecosystem where immense biological engines constantly fought to secure their next meal. Occasionally, these apex titans likely turned their lethal anatomy upon one another. Fossilized whale vertebrae displaying massive, healed serration marks suggest that giant sharks actively targeted early cetaceans, while raptorial whales undoubtedly possessed the jaw strength required to fatally crush a cartilaginous skeleton. To frame this ecological overlap as a malicious rivalry or a blood-soaked war drastically misinterprets the fundamental laws governing natural selection. Predators do not harbor hatred for their competitors. Every aggressive interaction, every stolen kill, and every violent territorial dispute stemmed from strict caloric mathematics. Maintaining a 1.5-meter body demands a staggering daily influx of kilojoules. The pumping of warm blood through tons of mammalian muscle requires an equally massive continuous fuel source. Both Megalodon and Leviathan targeted the exact same energy-rich prey. Smaller, blubber-insulated baleen whales congregating around the cold water upwellings represented essential oceanic batteries, packed tightly with the concentrated fats and proteins required to sustain gigantism. Whenever the giant shark and the raptorial whale crossed paths, they were merely executing complex thermodynamic equations. A fight over a floating carcass or deterring a rival from a feeding ground represented a strictly calculated risk, weighed heavily against potential energetic gains. The waste of precious kinetic energy on an unnecessary fight could lead rapidly to starvation, particularly when accelerating 50 tons of mass requires immediately replenishing the cellular fuel burned during the exertion. Consequently, these titans likely avoided direct, fatal combat whenever possible, opting instead for intense acoustic displays, aggressive posturing, or opportunistic scavenging to secure their caloric requirements. The calculation of these prehistoric energy budgets allows humanity to perceive ancient ecosystems with unparalleled clarity. Biologists quantify the exact metabolic requirements of immense marine predators, translating pounds of consumed blubber into joules of expended kinetic energy. We map these invisible thermodynamic ledgers, understanding precisely why specific feeding grounds became hotly contested ecological real estate. To grasp the intricate mathematical balance required to sustain gigantism highlights the highly delicate nature of absolute dominance. The occupation of the highest trophic level offers immense immediate benefits, yet it simultaneously creates a profound vulnerability to even minor environmental fluctuations. An apex predator sits precariously atop a massive pyramid of biomass, dependent on the unbroken stability of every single biological layer beneath it. Operation at the biological limit meant that neither Megalodon nor Leviathan possessed any substantial buffer against dramatic planetary changes. To sustain a marine ecosystem capable of supporting two distinct apex predators heavily depends on an unending, massive supply of concentrated prey. For millions of years, the localized upwellings provided exactly that required bounty. However, the Earth functions as a dynamic, constantly shifting thermodynamic engine. As the Miocene transitioned slowly into the Pliocene epoch, the global climate continued its relentless cooling trajectory. Polar ice caps expanded aggressively, drawing monumental volumes of water directly out of the global ocean system. Sea levels plummeted worldwide, drastically draining the shallow, warm-water coastal nurseries where smaller baleen whales traditionally raised their vulnerable calves. Losing these vital breeding grounds triggered a catastrophic cascade throughout the marine food web. The populations of medium-sized prey species plummeted sharply, drastically reducing the total available biomass required to fuel the massive hunters. Furthermore, shifting tectonic plates altered oceanic circulation patterns once again, causing the previously reliable upwelling zones to migrate, weaken, or vanish. The immense caloric equation that had successfully sustained both cartilaginous and mammalian apex predators suddenly broke down. A shrinking prey base simply could not provide enough kilojoules to support two competing biological crowns. The pelagic arena was rapidly closing its doors to hypercarnivorous giants. When faced with a rapidly contracting food supply, the contrasting architectural designs of the two predators dictated different survival trajectories. Solitary reliance on ambush tactics severely limited the giant cartilaginous fish. Being accustomed to hunting medium-sized, slow-moving baleen whales in relatively temperate zones, Megalodon found itself unable to chase agile prey into the increasingly freezing waters near the expanding poles. Without the internal heat generation required to survive prolonged exposure to frigid temperatures, the giant shark remained strictly bound to the shrinking equatorial waters. Competition intensified exponentially as food sources evaporated. Without sufficient calories to fuel its massive frame, the species faced a mathematically unavoidable decline. Biology offers no pardons for metabolic deficit. Mammalian intelligence, conversely, offered a highly flexible response to ecological collapse. Raptorial whales possessing extremely high metabolic rates could dive deeper and swim further into the chilling polar latitudes, tracking the migrating prey that sought refuge in freezing, nutrient-dense waters. More importantly, the cetacean lineage possessed an astonishing capacity for rapid evolutionary reinvention. Rather than stubbornly adhering to an apex predatory model that demanded constant, massive caloric influxes from large, dangerous kills, certain branches of the whale family tree began experimenting with different feeding mechanics. Social networks adapted, acoustic communication evolved further, and dietary preferences shifted strategically towards smaller, far more abundant food sources. Tracing this divergence reveals how adaptability ultimately triumphs over rigid biological specialization. We study the gradual disappearance of massive, raptorial teeth from the fossil record and observe a profound dietary pivot occurring across the cetacean family. Humanity actively documents how ecological pressure relentlessly sculpts biological form over deep time. To watch a supreme apex predator fade quietly into extinction while its mammalian counterparts alter their feeding strategy demonstrates the unsentimental logic driving evolutionary biology. The ocean was actively forcing a complete anatomical renegotiation. Survival in the freezing climate required willingly discarding the heavy, demanding crown of the apex hunter. A new, vastly more efficient method of harvesting oceanic calories was rapidly emerging, preparing to push mammalian biology toward physical dimensions previously thought impossible by the laws of physics. Retreating from the hyper-carnivorous arms race demanded an extraordinary anatomical inversion. Rather than developing sharper armaments to capture increasingly elusive large prey, a distinct group of marine mammals turned their attention toward the most diminutive organisms on the planet. To survive the shifting global climate meant abandoning the pursuit of individual, high-energy targets. Sustenance lay instead within sprawling, microscopic clouds of biomass drifting passively through the freezing polar currents. To harvest this diffuse energy, the ancestral baleen whales orchestrated a breathtaking structural compromise, permanently trading solid ivory for flexible keratin, mineralized teeth, previously capable of crushing heavy vertebrate bone, gradually disappeared from their upper jaws. As a replacement for these ancient weapons, hundreds of closely packed, fringed plates descended directly from the palate. Constructed from the exact same structural protein that forms human fingernails and hair, this evolutionary trade fundamentally redefined the biological limits of physical growth. Filter feeding allowed these creatures to function effectively as massive living sieves, transforming a swift, targeted predator into a slow, deliberate mountain that eats dust. A detailed look at the precise construction of this filtration system reveals a masterpiece of biological engineering. Baleen does not grow statically. It continuously erupts from the upper gums, constantly regenerating to replace the fibrous edges worn away by the abrasive action of the massive tongue. Hundreds of primary plates form a rigid outer wall, while finer, hair-like bristles face the interior of the mouth, overlapping intricately to create an inescapable, highly calibrated mesh. Only water molecules can easily slip through this dense keratin thicket. Every solid organic particle caught within the fray is swiftly swallowed. To grasp the thermodynamic brilliance of this adaptation requires examining the hidden mathematics governing the oceanic food web. Energy transfer between biological trophic levels operates with notorious inefficiency. Whenever a predatory fish consumes a smaller crustacean, or a seal consumes that fish, approximately 90% of the original solar energy is permanently lost as metabolic heat. Apex hunters, occupying the highest rungs of this ecological ladder, receive only a microscopic fraction of the base caloric output. By bypassing these intermediate steps, whales circumvent this massive energetic penalty. By consuming euphausids, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans, commonly known as krill mysticetes, effectively tap directly into the foundational energy reservoir of the sea. They strategically cut out the biological middlemen. Human researchers reveal this incredible thermodynamic shortcut through rigorous ecological modeling. Biologists trace distinct isotopic signatures from floating phytoplankton directly into the dense muscle tissue of modern leviathans, quantifying how skipping multiple trophic levels unlocks an unprecedented caloric surplus. We utilize advanced mass spectrometry to analyze thin slivers of baleen, effectively reading chemical timelines that record years of seasonal migrations and dietary shifts. A single strand of this fibrous material holds a detailed chemical diary of a creature migrating across entire ocean basins. The decoding of these localized isotopic markers demonstrates our phenomenal ability to extract immense data from seemingly insignificant biological detritus. We translate invisible chemical pathways into a comprehensive understanding of biological maximums, proving definitively that achieving immense physical size requires eating at the absolute bottom of the food chain. Glacial cycles intensifying across the Pleistocene epoch provided the ultimate geological catalyst for this filter-feeding revolution. Massive ice sheets advanced relentlessly across the northern and southern continents, acting as continental-scale bulldozers, grinding solid bedrock into fine powder. These encroaching glaciers dumped millions of tons of iron-rich sediment directly into the polar seas. Microscopic phytoplankton require this exact mineral to photosynthesize effectively. Consequently, the frigid, turbulent polar waters transformed into incredibly rich agricultural zones, blooming with astronomical quantities of plant life. Trillions of krill swarmed to harvest these dense blooms, congregating in localized clusters that visually stained the ocean red for miles. The exploitation of this highly concentrated feast, however, required enduring water temperatures hovering perilously close to the freezing point. Aquatic environments drain body heat 25 times faster than atmospheric air. For a warm-blooded mammal, lingering in polar waters presents a lethal physiological threat unless successfully counteracted by a massive internal biological furnace. Physics dictates a strict geometric law regarding heat retention and physical scale. As a three-dimensional object expands, its internal volume increases at a drastically faster rate than its external surface area. Small marine mammals possess a massive surface area relative to their internal mass, causing them to radiate vital core heat rapidly into a cold environment. To expand the overall physical scale of an animal drastically reduces this rapid cooling effect. The wrapping of a monumental internal volume within an extremely thick layer of highly vascularized blubber creates an impregnable thermodynamic fortress. Growth was not merely a passive consequence of abundant food. It functioned as an absolute physiological requirement for surviving the freezing polar buffet. The chilling ocean explicitly demanded gigantism. By pivoting inward and restructuring their anatomy to harvest the smallest available calories, these mysticetes engineered a body plan that perfectly manipulated the laws of thermal dynamics. They capitalized on the icy climate rather than perishing beneath its severe temperatures. The execution of this massive harvest required developing a new biomechanical maneuver known to modern science as lunge feeding. When approaching a dense swarm of krill, a rorqual whale accelerates rapidly, opening its cavernous mouth to an impossibly wide angle. Intricate arrays of elastic connective tissue and deeply folded ventral pleats line the throat, stretching dramatically to accommodate an astonishing influx of fluid. Within a single, explosive second, the creature engulfs a volume of water exceeding its own massive body weight. Forward momentum halts instantly as the sheer physical drag of the captured ocean turns the animal into a sudden biological parachute. By contracting heavily muscled throat pouches, the whale then forces tons of seawater outward through the hanging keratin plates. The liquid escapes effortlessly back into the sea, while millions of trapped krill remain securely behind, ready to be channeled into a multi-chambered stomach. The calculation of the complex fluid dynamics of this process showcases human ingenuity operating at its absolute finest. Bioengineers affix sophisticated digital tags to the backs of surfacing whales, recording precise data points regarding velocity, pitch, and rapid deceleration. We mathematically map the immense kinetic forces involved in accelerating and instantly halting a 100-ton animal, translating raw biomechanical data into a mesmerizing digital ballet of aquatic physics. To reap the staggering caloric rewards of this feeding mechanism eventually culminated in the emergence of the blue whale. Taxonomically designated as Balaenoptera musculus, this magnificent entity represents the peak of biological mass in the documented history of Earth. Surpassing even the most colossal terrestrial dinosaurs, a mature adult can stretch over 100 feet in length and weigh upwards of 150 tons. Terrestrial physics strictly prohibit such proportions, as gravity would easily crush a skeletal frame of this magnitude under its own immense weight. Suspended perfectly within the buoyant cradle of the sea, this mammal operates free from terrestrial constraints. A heart the size of a small automobile pumps hundreds of gallons of blood through a vast circulatory network. Massive arteries, wide enough for a human to comfortably swim through, deliver oxygen to tons of highly specialized muscle tissue. Everything about this organism defies conventional biological limits, pushing the mammalian architectural blueprint to its maximum capacity. To sustain this colossal scale begins immediately upon birth. Deep within the temperate equatorial birthing grounds, a newborn calf enters the liquid world already weighing several tons. While nursing beneath the crashing waves, the infant consumes hundreds of liters of incredibly fat-rich milk every single day, converting liquid nutrients into solid mass at a staggering rate. By gaining approximately 90 kilograms every 24 hours, the young mastocete transforms raw maternal calories into rapid physical expansion. Human scientists meticulously track this transfer of biological wealth, utilizing biochemical assays to analyze the lipid concentrations within cetacean milk. We understand how a mother sacrifices her own stored blubber reserves, fasting for months while simultaneously fueling the fastest growth rate currently recorded in the animal kingdom. The coordination of their deliberate movements across a sprawling, global habitat forced these colossal entities to evolve an acoustic mechanism perfectly suited for their unprecedented size. High-frequency sonar, vital for pinpointing individual prey in deep trenches, lacks the raw acoustic power necessary to travel across vast ocean basins. Navigation of an entire planet demands a significantly broader broadcast range. Consequentially, blue whales evolved the ability to generate immensely powerful, low-frequency infrasonic pulses, propagating flawlessly through the deep oceanic sound channel. These resonant rumbles can travel uninterrupted for thousands of miles. Two individuals separated by entire continents can effectively communicate, sharing vital information regarding shifting ice shelves and distant krill concentrations. Oceanographers deploying deep-sea hydrophone arrays routinely intercept these majestic global broadcasts. The translation of these deep, inaudible frequencies into visual spectrograms allows human observers to clearly visualize a hidden, planetary-scale conversation. We map an acoustic web spanning the entire Earth, marveling at how these giants transform the global ocean into a singular, vibrating communication network. The witness of such a magnificent expression of life instills a profound reverence for the sheer capability of natural selection. We do not look upon these giants as evolutionary anomalies. Human intelligence accurately recognizes them as the triumphant answer to a highly complex thermodynamic puzzle. To piece together this majestic narrative demonstrates the breathtaking capacity of scientific investigation. Researchers deploy advanced aerial drones to measure the dimensions of these leviathans from above, utilizing precise photogrammetry to estimate body mass without ever disturbing the gentle giants. We sequence their genetic code, reading the molecular history of their phenomenal growth spurts perfectly preserved within their DNA. Humanity acts as a highly conscious mirror, reflecting upon the grandeur of a species that successfully conquered the globe by choosing to consume its microscopic dust. This conscious documentation remains an achievement unique to our species. Unraveling the intricate mechanics of unprecedented gigantism proves that our analytical minds are just as expansive and awe-inspiring as the physical leviathans we diligently study. The oceans had finally produced their masterpiece, a gentle behemoth navigating the globe in search of freezing, nutrient-dense waters, functioning as a flawless biological testament to the enduring power of adaptation. As they glide through contemporary marine environments, these modern leviathans inhabit an ecosystem reshaped by fluctuating global temperatures and shifting tectonic plates. Their massive flukes propel them at a measured, unhurried pace, conserving immense reserves of metabolic energy while traversing thousands of miles of open water. In moving with deliberate grace, contemporary whales operate as biological custodians within a staggering fluid archive. Countless terabytes of evolutionary data reside safely within their enormous cellular structures. Trapped within the double helix of their DNA lie the microscopic, discarded remnants of terrestrial genes, acting as silent molecular testaments to their ancient hoofed forebears. To observe a migrating pod is akin to watching venerable scholars traverse the silent aisles of a monumental, unread library. Water flowing over their streamlined flanks carries the chemical signatures of a dynamically changing planet, providing a continuous stream of environmental information that these animals process effortlessly. Rather than conquering the sea through frantic, aggressive outbursts, they have mastered it through profound endurance and highly calculated metabolic efficiency. Generations of distinct cultural knowledge pass seamlessly from mother to calf, ensuring complex survival strategies remain intact across vast generational divides. Coastal shallows and abyssal trenches alike form the majestic halls of this submerged repository, serving as a living museum where the architects of deep time continue to write their ongoing biological narrative. Human curiosity steadfastly refuses to leave this grand repository unexamined. Driven by an insatiable desire to comprehend the natural world, brilliant minds have engineered sophisticated methods to walk alongside these gentle giants without ever disturbing their pelagic sanctuary. Orbiting high above the exosphere, networks of specialized satellites continuously scan the sea surface, detecting the microscopic thermal blooms left behind by exhaling whales. Oceanographers affix temporary, non-invasive biologging tags to the dorsal fins of migrating individuals, transforming the animals themselves into autonomous oceanic data collectors. Held securely by specialized suction cups designed to dissolve harmlessly over time, these tiny technological marvels record highly precise metrics regarding dive depth, ambient water temperature, and three-dimensional acceleration. By transmitting this wealth of information back to terrestrial laboratories via radio bursts whenever the animal surfaces, the sensors allow researchers to digitally reconstruct invisible migratory corridors spanning entire hemispheres. Translating raw telemetry into comprehensive ecological maps stands as a spectacular testament to our scientific ingenuity. We trace the invisible highways carved into the water column by ancient instincts, bringing the hidden mechanics of marine migration directly into the brilliant light of human understanding. Listening to the environment yields equally astounding scientific revelations. Submerged arrays of highly sensitive hydrophones, initially deployed by militaries to monitor submarine movements, now serve a far more majestic and unifying purpose. Marine acousticians utilize these deep-water listening stations to intercept low-frequency pulses echoing across vast oceanic basins. Physics provides a highly unique acoustic pathway for these transmissions, roughly 1,000 meters beneath the surface. Declining water temperature and increasing hydrostatic pressure achieve a perfect thermodynamic equilibrium, creating a phenomenon known as the deep sound channel. Acoustic waves entering this specific layer refract continuously inward, preventing the sound from scattering toward the surface or crashing into the seafloor. Utilizing this natural waveguide, infrasonic whale calls travel practically unhindered for thousands of miles. When analyzing complex spectrograms generated from these pristine recordings, researchers identify distinct regional dialects among various pods, proving definitively that cultural transmission exists far beyond the primate family tree. Complex songs evolve sequentially over multiple breeding seasons, spreading rapidly across populations like a highly sophisticated oral tradition. The decoding of these acoustic patterns allows humanity to eavesdrop on a planetary scale conversation. By synthesizing mathematics, marine biology, and audio engineering, our species has successfully bridged the formidable communication gap between terrestrial observers and aquatic navigators. We proudly document an intelligence that parallels our own, thriving flawlessly under a completely different set of physical laws. Yet, despite our phenomenal technological advancements, the pelagic landscape fiercely guards its deepest structural secrets. Scanning the surface and mapping the acoustic channels only scratches the outermost layer of an incomprehensibly vast, three-dimensional volume. Beneath the sunlit epipelagic zone lies a staggering expanse of unexplored territory. Plunging past the reach of satellite telemetry and optical sensors, the bathypelagic and abyssopelagic regions remain largely untouched by human instruments. Electromagnetic energy, essential for wireless data transfer and global positioning, dissipates almost instantly upon striking dense saltwater, rendering conventional tracking methodologies useless in the deep. Global bathymetric initiatives readily admit that a massive majority of the ocean floor has never been mapped at high resolution. Topographical maps charting the desolate surfaces of neighboring celestial bodies frequently possess far greater detail than the charts depicting our own seabed. Immense mountain ranges, towering thermal vents, and sprawling abyssal plains stretch out in absolute blackness, hidden from our most advanced sonar arrays. To grasp the sheer scale of this unmapped territory instills a profound sense of awe rather than a feeling of defeat. An encounter with these biological and geographical blind spots ignites the very core of human scientific ambition. Limitations embedded firmly within our current sensory technology do not represent permanent barriers or intellectual failures. Instead, they serve as grand invitations for future generations of thinkers, engineers, and oceanographic explorers. The acknowledgement that our delicate instruments cannot presently peer through thousands of meters of crushing hydrostatic pressure simply motivates us to invent new physics-defying methodologies. The design of autonomous robotic submersibles capable of withstanding unimaginable extreme conditions showcases our relentless drive to illuminate the unknown. Titanium spheres engineered meticulously to resist thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch, protect highly delicate cameras and robotic manipulators, granting humanity a mechanical foothold in a highly hostile physical regime. Every single time a deep-sea probe returns to the surface with unprecedented high-definition footage of a previously undiscovered benthic ecosystem, we permanently expand the boundaries of known reality. Humanity thrives exactly at this dynamic intersection of meticulously mapped data and looming geological mystery. We stand proudly as a species defined by a unique, unwavering ability to ask profound questions about the spaces we cannot yet physically reach. To contemplate the vast, unlit volume of the planet forces a fundamental re-evaluation of biological potential. Countless ecological regimes operate silently far beneath the lowest acoustic frequencies our deepest hydrophones can currently detect. Alien food webs, sustained completely by volatile chemosynthesis rather than solar radiation, flourish beautifully around scalding hydrothermal vents divorced from the surface world. Extremophile bacteria harvest vital energy directly from toxic hydrogen sulfide, supporting sprawling communities of giant tube worms and eyeless crustaceans in permanent darkness. The recognition that a small, hooved mammal successfully evolved into a 100-ton filter feeder navigating global currents proves that the evolutionary possibilities hidden within the deep remain staggering. Gelatinous organisms possessing radical, decentralized nervous systems and bioluminescent predators utilizing undocumented hunting strategies likely patrol the uncharted abyssal canyons. Extreme physics and highly concentrated chemistry combine seamlessly in the deepest oceanic trenches to create environments so radically alien they continuously challenge our fundamental definitions of life itself. Anticipating what biological marvels await future discovery fuels the relentless, unstoppable engine of human scientific inquiry. We understand perfectly that the magnificent catalogue of life on Earth is far from complete when gazing out across the undulating expanse of the modern ocean. An observer witnesses a spectacular convergence of deep evolutionary time and boundless scientific future. Breaking the surface tension to inhale a massive breath of atmospheric air, a mature leviathan momentarily bridges the narrow gap between the sunlit terrestrial world and the profound aquatic depths. Water cascades brilliantly down its broad, keratin-lined jaws before it slips quietly back into the comforting embrace of the liquid environment. That single, powerful exhalation carries the unbroken biological echoes of 50 million years of relentless, triumphant adaptation. By leaving a swirling, temporary footprint on the surface water, the gentle ruler descends gracefully into an environment that continually defies our total comprehension. Standing upon the solid shore, armed with brilliant analytical minds and ever-evolving sensing technology, humanity watches this descent with profound, quiet respect. Our refined instruments will continue to measure, our orbital satellites will continually track, and our collective intellect will ceaselessly strive to decode the intricate mechanical workings of this vast aquatic biosphere. To embrace the strict limits of our current technological vision merely prepares us for the breathtaking, inevitable discoveries of tomorrow. The oceans remain a magnificent, pulsing enigma, functioning as a fluid cosmos, thriving vigorously right here on our own planet. Driven by an unyielding, beautiful curiosity, we will forever seek to understand the lingering mystery of what else breathes silently in the dark.